blue that are purple. I like to call myself purple. I'm red and blue. I fall blue on many topics, and I fall red on many topics. But in general, I think in regards to politics, I like the idea of lack of governance to help people grow, because people don't change or people don't grow unless they have pain and suffering. So if I create such a false environment for my civilians or my people that they never have any pain and suffering, and they never have to really change or grow, or they never really have to go out and take action, then I'm kind of creating a false fabricated environment for them, and I'm not really doing them any good. So I think about education system and a healthcare system that might be more liberal, but then outside of that, a lot more conservative, free enterprise for business and free operation for people. I think that's a really interesting topic. And you ready over there, Zay?
Yeah, I'm ready.
So what's your take on that topic and the politics? And
well, I wasn't trying to get into issues in my opinion on them. My point of wanting to talk about politics is less about what I believe or you believe or anyone believes. It's about what you mentioned about the bigger picture. About
it is all about
yep, that's not what I was getting into, though. Let me finish. It's what you were talking about how people are going about the division in our country, where we feel like if you disagree with someone that you have to hate on them and talk shit and say they're a piece of shit and start attacking someone personally. Like, everyone has the right to believe what they want to believe, and everyone has the right to vote how they vote, and you can't hate someone for that. And the fact that, it's actually set up that way where our political systems, they want us to be like that. The media fuels the division and hate. Like, they create campaigns. If you listen to the articles about the Trump, their team, and then even the Democratic side too they openly are talking about finding ways to create campaigns and market them a certain way on purpose that's attacking the other candidate, that's painting them in a horrible image. So it's really focusing on personalities over principles, and it's really not rooted in leadership and solution-oriented when it comes to these candidates and how they're approaching their campaign runs. And that philosophy combined with media that is controlled by, also the media is ran by these people that are tied to these organizations, the people who own Fox News, who own CNN, or all of these media companies have their own agendas that are affiliated, having all their money and relationships tied to whatever party they're affiliated with. They're not just giving you straight, unbiased media. So when you throw that all in a pot, you got people that are also uneducated and people who are emotional and easily influenced. They fuel this fire that just like every time we have an election, especially since the last 4 years, it just gets worse and worse. And then when you add the racial division in our country on top of that, because race is always an important topic when it comes to politics, it's worse and worse. When you add COVID in this election, it's worse and worse. So it's like being aware of all that and recognizing that it's okay to have differences and believe things differently, but you don't need to personally attack someone for their belief systems differently. That's the key. Individuals and within people within the politics, but that's not what's happening. There's more division and there's more lack of unity, and it's rooted in, a lot of it's rooted in the media not wanting us to be able to do that. Like, the media is not promoting that. The media isn't saying you can be wrong or you can disagree and not hate the motherfucker. That's the big issue. We can sit here and talk about our opinions on each topic, which is fine. That's good too, and we probably will do that on more episodes. But on this one, I just really want to talk about that because our show, when we talk about More Love Nation and we talk about We're Media, we're talking about these principles of compassion, love, and unity. And I think it's more evident now than ever as we come up to another election to bring those principles when it comes to voting who we are, and then not like being hateful towards someone, even if they're doing things that maybe are fucked up or we believe.
But that's a big topic for you. My point is, I agree with you. But my point is auditing what makes me more empathetic. And when I'm more empathetic and I'm more open-minded, I'm more likely to be cooperative, unite with others. And for me, my ability to be empathetic and open-minded and be friends with people that are from both sides of the aisle is directly correlated with my pain and suffering. Because I've been through these X, Y, Z events, I'm able to connect and relate to people and be more open-minded and empathetic. So then I correlate everything politically back to pain and suffering and freedom and the ability to grow via pain and suffering. So for me, all my growth has come from experiences and pain and suffering, and that directly correlates with the level at which I'm able to cooperate with others because I'm more empathetic because of those experiences. So I think that, for me, is how I have my opinion of politics and why.
Yeah, but you can't just look at your personal pain and suffering and not look at other people's.
That's what I just said. But in order for me to understand other people's pain and suffering, I have to have more pain and suffering. If I've only been through very little, or I've had very little strife or battle or struggle, my ability to relate and understand all these other people's struggle and strife is going to be less likely. So
Not necessarily. I think to relate, maybe, but you don't need your own. I don't need to personally go through someone's pain to understand them. Like maybe it might be more.
Makes it a lot easier.
Of course, but it's not
if
needed.
I'm someone that's been through jail and I talk to other guys who've been through jail, it's a lot easier to relate.
It is to relate, but I'm not saying
relating.
relating. I'm talking about understanding. You don't need to relate to understand.
But coming from a guy that's in a program,
You can just see people's pain in their face.
But being
I don't need to go through their pain to see that.
But being a guy that's in a program that's about commonalities and similarities, that's basically what the program that you live is about.
What program are you talking about?
The program that you live your life on, the growth steps that you live by, the steps that.
I'm saying, but what I'm saying is, I've worked in the field of chemical dependency, and some of the best counselors that I know, they're not in recovery. They've never had an addiction.
But if you look at the other
so
programs,
they don't need to be in recovery. That's a great example. Someone in that's a great counselor.
Actually,
they don't need to be in the addiction to be a great counselor.
It makes it much easier though when they can relate to the individual.
It makes it the only thing it makes easier is building rapport.
Relationships. That's exactly what.
But that's one
about.
aspect of compassion and empathy. You don't need that to have compassion and empathy. You can be someone who's gone to the same experience as someone, but you can be a fucking dick and not have any empathy for them, even though you came from the same spot in the same situation. I see it all the time. People have gone through shit and they're still a dick and an asshole, and they don't have any compassion for someone else, even though they went through the same thing. That is huge, and I think, but because you're talking about your own pain and suffering, you should have more open-mindedness to someone else's pain and suffering, even if it's completely different, because you should be able to recognize that we all go through our own pain and suffering, and just because, this is another thing that I think is fucked up, people view because they think their situation was worse, or their pain and suffering is worse, makes them different. It's like, yes, some people are more, but someone's pain and suffering could be growing up in a middle-class family and having to go through their whole life of being pressured to be a lawyer when they just wanted to be a painter. Like, that's their own emotional pain and suffering to go through, and because of that inability that we think our pain and suffering is unique, I think that's the key, because like I think it's important to talk about our pain and suffering, like you're saying, but we can't make it, oh, I'm unique and I can't relate to you because I haven't been through your specific pain and suffering. And the longer I've been alive and I've been sober, I realize my own personal pain and suffering. Yeah, it is nice to do that, to get connection and relate, but it is really not that needed. Like, if I'm really open-minded to people, I can connect to anyone's pain and suffering, even if I haven't been through it, just because I know I've been through my own. Like, it's like once you realize that pain and suffering can come in millions of forms, and in fact, a lot of it's self-imposed, our pain and suffering. It's our reaction to it. Like, it's like, for example, it's not someone's fault.
Thanks for joining us.
Like,
folks.
if someone gets assaulted or sexually assaulted or physically assaulted, that's not their fault, right? But the pain and suffering that results from that is on that individual's responsibility to take accountability for how they deal with it. So like we get like a moment of suffering and then we like prolong that for years and hours and whatever. And I think that's really important. But I don't want to get too far off the topic.
I want to ask you though, so then how do you correlate? So when you relate to someone, I'm gonna let you bring value for it then. I want to ask you, when you relate to someone, what is the number one characteristic or quality that makes you capable of relating to them?
It is my natural urge to want to be someone who helps heal, who helps cause solutions, who actually listens and cares. And I'm not listening to like point out and say, oh man, I need to listen to see if I've been through something to someone, to see if I've been through what they've been through. It's just like I see someone in front of me, I recognize a human, I recognize that they're going through something.
Interesting.
And that
you're not mentioning the other. That's interesting to hear.
But it's like when I'm listening to someone, it's my natural urge to want to help them and be someone who helps them heal and grow and be a solution. So when I'm going to a situation, someone's talking to me, it doesn't matter what they're going through, I'm listening. Now the key is let me finish. The key is, of course, if I have personal experience in something, I will do it. But if I don't have personal experience, what I do, see, this is why you got to
But
listen.
we had a conversation recently.
Let me finish,
We had a
though,
conversation
but-
a month ago on the phone where you actually were talking about how you can't help other people outside of a specific set of characteristics.
Listen, you didn't let me finish. If I don't have that specific set of characteristics, I can still help by deferring them to someone I know in my network that has.
So
So,
you're-
if I'm not going into it with this,
Just
I don't
made
have
my
a specific.
point.
I don't
Just
have.
made my point.
Yeah, but you
if
don't
you
listen.
don't have that experience.
And now listen, and I'm not saying I couldn't help them without that experience. I personally believe if I know someone that can help them better than me, I will defer them to that. If I don't, I will do my best in my own personal experience to do that. So it's like that's but that's how you help.
You just made my point. So great. Thanks for answering that question.
No, but listen, let me finish. You don't need that, though. That's a specific thing because I'm not like a therapist. Now, if I was a trained therapist that has a set skills where you help people with processing information, that's what they would do. So, like, I have friends that are therapists and clinicians and doctors. Like, if I was a trained doctor that went to 10 years of schooling to be a doctor,
But that's just
listen,
medical.
my personal experience would be irrelevant. I'm a trained doctor. I'm going to help you medically because I know how to help you. I'm not a
Yes.
doctor, so
you're
I'm,
only able to help men one medically. Exactly.
so what I'm saying is,
You're making my point.
yeah, but what I'm saying is I'm not like a therapist, a doctor. I'm not a clinician. I'm not a nurse. So when it comes to my ability to help someone,
It's directly correlated to how many experiences I've been through.
not necessarily.
100%. Look at guys like Gary Vaynerchuk. His ability to bring value to other people correlates directly with his value and experiences.
Yeah,
100%.
but what I'm saying
So
is I don't need that to be there to be someone who just listens to help them. Like, I'm just talking about going into it for non-selfish reasons to just listen. A lot of times they just want someone to listen to them. I don't even have to
100%.
give them a solution. That's my whole point. You don't need to be a fixer. People go into shit selfishly because they want to be a fixer and an ego. If, like what I'm saying, what makes my ability to connect to someone is rooted and not because I can help them or even my personal experience. That helps. It's me just wanting to listen and listen to them and care and
All
be
right,
a compassionate person. And when they see that I care, that I'm listening, that 90% of the time helps. Even if I don't have been through nothing they've been through and I have no solution for them. And I know no one that's been through what they've been through. That helps.
So now I
But
get
it's not
to-
needed. It is not needed to
Now
be
I
a
get
good
to-
person and human.
But now I get to interject. So that's my point that I just wanted to do is I wanted to make that point is that my ability to help others is directly correlated with my experiences.
It definitely helps, yeah, of
Because
course.
if I have more experiences like me, I've had brain surgery, I've been homeless, I've slept on the streets in a few different states. I found my mom did on New Year's Day. I've now at 28 years old realized this and after listening to guys like Gary Vaynerchuk and absorbing information from them and having my experiences and moving forward, being able to bring dialogue and insight and perspective to things, and I'm doing it consistently at the hostel with people that have PhDs and they don't even know what I'm talking about. It's really remarkable when you start to see that, and you're a high school dropout and you're an ex-drug addict who found his mom dead and so forth, and you have insights and perspectives that people with PhDs that graduated from Cornell that are currently staying at the hostel, shout out to Khaled, and he didn't understand empiricism and he didn't understand the concepts of empiricism. So I think it's really interesting, and I think it's a really interesting topic, having listened to a Joe Rogan podcast recently that talks about experiences and teaching people to try, like, experiencing things more. And I think my ability to bring value to others, to have the ability to listen, directly correlates with my experiences because of my pain and suffering. Because the more I've been through, the more I've seen, the more I've tasted, the more shit I've ate, the more likely I'm able to relate to people that have ate shit.
That definitely helps, but I don't think you need to have a PhD or ate shit to be someone who's just a human who cares and listening and just someone that wants to have someone to listen to them.
I think that's a great
Because
point.
a lot of people just don't feel heard. No one really cares. You can have the shit that you just talked about, and you can still be a fucking piece of shit dick that doesn't help someone have no compassion.
But if you audit listening, though, we can start to dive into it. Let's lean into it.
I think it's huge to be doing those
Someone
things.
that's going to be more likely to listen is someone that's been through those
Of
events.
course, but you don't
So-
need that, though, is what I'm
so,
trying to
like-
explain. You can remove all of that and recognize if you can combine that, what you're talking about, with just being a caring person, of course, that's the most powerful. But I don't want to think people, because they haven't been through shit, means they're not valuable and that they can't provide something to someone, even if they're someone in front of them they haven't been through. You definitely
they're not-
have an advantage. What you're talking about gives you a distinct advantage because you're living through a practitioner going through it. So I definitely agree with you.
Practitioner, essential.
But I think it's not needed to just be a caring person that people can tell you care. Like, I care. People know when I'm doing something, whatever I'm doing it because I care. I don't have an ulterior motive that's rooted in me because I'm selfishly like a lot of people help selfishly. to boost they don't really care about the person in front of them. They're doing it for their own selfish reasons. Like, you can be a helper and fixer and you're still selfish. It's like rooted in.
Yeah, well,
so I think it's rooted in
if someone wants to help. If someone starts a media company and is like living in a hostel with I just think there's lots of cases where scientifically, if you're about evolution and you're about moving.
Of course, I'm
humanity
not
forward,
talking about that. What we're talking about, I'm not talking about you or me. Obviously, you're doing and what we're doing isn't selfish, but you can tell when someone's not doing something based out of just the goodness of their heart. Is what I'm saying.
So you touch on practitionership, though, Zay, and I think that's essential.
Well, of course, that's huge.
So
you can theorize about all this shit, but if you're not doing it, you're really not someone who's providing value.
So that's exactly right. That's the number one most important thing in the Vayner model, the Vayner Media model. Gary Vee says the number one most important aspect is practitionership. And when you look at this and bring it back to what we're talking about, it makes sense. Because practitionership has a direct correlation with experience and knowledge being derived from that experience and that insight and that perspective. Because via that insight and that perspective, you can absorb qualitative and quantitative measurements. And you can operate scientifically, testing, measuring, and developing as a practitioner. You become neutral and you become scientific in everything you do and via practitionership. So I go into something neutral, and I'm just testing, measuring, and developing. And I'm taking I'm practicing, testing, measuring, and developing. And I'm just absorbing qualitative and quantitative measurements, and no matter what I'm doing. So for me, that's how I've deducted all my insights and perspectives, is having been in lots of different arenas of life. I've been able to absorb qualitative and quantitative data that now moving forward makes it much easier to be a practitioner of any arena. So no matter what arena I step in, if I sit down with the hostel and I hear someone talk about jail, I can connect in an instant. If I hear someone talk about drug addiction, I can connect in an instant. If I hear someone talk about finding someone dead or losing someone that they loved, I can connect in an instant.
Of course you can.
So it's really powerful if you've ever been and the thing that's cool is that you're saying, Zay, I agree with you.
I think that's why I'm better than most people that getting along with tons of people, because I'm able to combine what you're talking about, but I don't leverage that and make that something that I need to connect to someone.
Totally, and I think
that's why I can get along with someone who's fucking been through nothing. He's been.
I just think you hit it on the head with that. Is that?
But I come into it.
Every human has been through pain and suffering. That's the powerful thing here.
Yeah, I agree. But
scale.
Another thing though that makes me connect so well is I realize this, and people might not realize this, but a lot of pain and suffering is self-imposed.
100%.
I don't care what anyone says. It's self-imposed. Is it our fault that our mom died? No, but it is self-imposed.
But lacking guidance and direction as a child is a really big topic here. Because ultimately, lacking parenting and direction as a child is a major letdown and failure.
I mean, obviously that's true too, but I still believe over your whole life, that's still self-imposed suffering. People bring that up till they're fucking 60, 50, and 60, and they're still talking about
That's a valid point, though. Joe Rogan, shout out to Joe Rogan again.
I will give you till you're 22 years old about parenting, but this day you turn 23 and you're still bitching about your parents, I'm sorry, I don't feel bad for you. Now it's you that you're still suffering. Like, you're old enough now, and we live in a technological age where you can find a new dad that you can mentor you.
I completely disagree. Being someone that became a felon at 18... I have been permanently impacted for my entire life based on a decision I made when I was 18 years old as a drug addict, as a high school dropout.
You can't blame your parents for you making that criminal activity.
I'm just telling
your parents weren't criminals.
What? If I'm honest, they were criminals.
I disagree.
My mom sold narcotics, and my dad sold dope.
No, mom didn't sell narcotics. You manipulated her to sell narcotics.
Mom, and she knew. There was points where I was doing drugs with my own mother. So if we got...
That was you manipulating her.
Okay,
she was a manipulated... You manipulated just like her.
My mom was unhealthy. My mom was an amazing woman. Shout out to Lisa.
Yeah, but you manipulated her.
My mom was...
To get high and use her drugs. Facts. Same with the older brother Solomon. He did the same thing.
Okay, dude, and what's your point? She was not...
How is that her fault that her son was smarter than her and manipulated her?
She wasn't equipped to be a healthy mother.
But she's not a criminal.
She codependent.
You just tried to say your mom was a criminal because you're the one who manipulated her. That's a criminal.
My mom was willing to sell narcotics that she was prescribed for her pain.
She didn't sell any narcotics. You sold narcotics.
No, she didn't. Dude,
Mom didn't do a
thing. Mom sold the narcotics together.
Dude, you sold all of the narcotics. You manipulated her to sell them, but that's a different topic. What I'm trying to say is you can't put anyone else's your behavior correcting felonies on no one but you as an 18-year-old adult.
Parents, though, so I want to dive into this, though, because parents have an obligation to raise their children and give them direction and purpose.
They could do that and you could still make a felony. It's not the parents' fault.
I'm not saying that, but you have it. It's
bullshit.
It's a huge topic.
Bullshit.
I'm going to talk about Joe Rogan.
Yeah, you act like people that are felons that don't come from perfect families. It's still their parents' fault.
Joe Rogan said, I challenge everyone to listen to Joe Rogan's episode with Mr. Chaplin. and they talk about the best blessing they both say you can have in life is quality parenting.
I'm not trying to say that.
It's the best blessing.
Of course it is. It's
Because
still your fault that you became a convicted
100%
felon. No one
own it.
else's.
But my parents were fucking terrible.
That's your view. I don't view them as terrible.
They weren't around.
You were using drugs and weren't even trying to engage with them.
I was fucking 12 years old doing drugs.
You can't put all that on
It's
your
just
parents.
an interesting point, though, because to me, if
I wanted to use drugs, dude. I wanted to. I didn't care if I had if I grew up in a lottie-dottie corporate lawyer family. I still would have got high, dude. I wanted to get high. No one forced me to.
Yeah, I know. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying parents have an obligation. At some point, you have to look at it. You're auditing. I agree with everything you're saying. Auditing myself, but there is a point where you have to have.
There is a point when your parents do your best, but you got fucked up kids that won't listen to their parents.
But there is a point.
You guys wouldn't listen to anything dad or mom would say. You guys did not listen to your parents at all.
100%. 100%. But my point
It's
is
not bad parenting.
How can you just say it's one-sided? That's what I'm saying. You have to audit the other
Not
side.
one-sided at all.
You have to audit the other
You're
side.
the one who's making it sound one-sided. You're not taking
But if there's
accountability
a-
for your fucked up actions.
If a kid gets convicted of a felon at say a kid's 14, 15, commits a felony, now he's a felon for the rest of his life and goes to prison. Sorry to say, that kid can't be blamed for that
Well,
shit.
first of all, you're not talking about 18. You said 14. It's way different. You're not convicted as an adult. So you're talking about a
I
different
was
story.
in trouble as a juvenile.
I understand that, but it's
I was arrested for
if your
felony
parents
assault.
aren't
I was
even
arrested for-
there.
I was arrested
If
in-
your parents aren't even there and your parents are gang members and now you're committing gang crimes because their parents are in gangs, that's different. Our parents were not fucking gang members. They weren't absent in our lives. They weren't ignoring us. Our parents weren't drug addicts getting high in front of us saying go fucking
We
shoot
were
up.
100% were abandoned.
I do not agree with that at all.
Oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't say
There was
that.
no abandonment. There was drugs in the home from our older brother having friends. He started using drugs, so then we started using drugs. It wasn't because our parents were pieces of shit and didn't care about us and had drugs and brought drugs in the home around us. We were 3 kids that didn't give a fuck about following anyone's rules.
Had no
No one wanted to follow anyone's rules.
But we also had no discipline.
You and Solomon, yeah, Dad tried to discipline us.
Dad was on. You can't discipline someone from a phone call.
You realize the reason why parents don't agree because Dad wanted to discipline and Mom didn't.
Yes,
so that's common.
So now you're talking about a great another topic. People that got married, that shouldn't have got married, that had kids, that shouldn't have had kids.
Well, that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes parents disagree with parenting, and that is a big issue. But at the same time, you can't deny the fact that your kids want to do whatever the fuck they want.
Thanks, Clayton, Michael, and I agree. An 18-year-old is still a child. I agree 100%.
Of course they are. I'm not trying to deny that.
Yeah,
What I said was 23, actually, not 18.
I agree. An 18-year-old is 100% a child. I agree, Clayton.
But it's still their fault they committed the crime. No one forced them to. You can't blame an 18-year-old's actions on their parents. Their parents, I'm not giving.
So what about a kid that's born as a blood drop, right?
Listen,
So,
I'm not giving the parents a free pass, guys. It's both sides. That's what I'm trying to say. But the thing that I'm trying to say is these kids don't take any responsibility for their actions. You need to own up that yes, you
trust
had
me.
bad parents, but you also committed that fucking crime and have to own it.
100%.
10 years from
I've
now,
done
you
the
can't
time.
be like, my life sucks because I committed a felony and my parents are fucking pieces of shit.
But when you're 10 years from now, you still have it haunting you from an arrest record. It plays a
That's
role.
you choosing it to let it haunt you. Again, that's your own self-pain and suffering.
It plays a role. Crimes stick with you for a long time, and it plays a major role.
And there are many people that commit felonies and commit crimes, and they totally change their life and get it back together. They
100%.
decide to change their behavior and not commit crimes anymore, and not use drugs, and not hang around criminals, and not be around people who think it's okay. And they understand their parents did the best that they could with what they had. And if their parents are still unhealthy, they cut themselves off from their parents, and like I said, they find new mentors. I do believe a child is still 18, but you can't tell me you're 23 years old and you're still bitching about your parents not being good enough parents, and that's why your life fucking sucks. Sorry, that's not an excuse. Does it parenting have the number one impact, what my brother said? Is it a blessing? Yes.
I think it's the
But
number
here's
one,
the
I
deal.
think it's the number one problem in America is lack of quality parenting and mentorship and direction for children.
I do think
it's
parenting's
the number
huge.
one problem in America.
I think
I will say that. I think it's the number one problem in America.
you could argue that. Yeah, you could argue that for sure. I'm not
Most
trying-
people have kids and they don't give them direction, they don't give them guidance, they don't give them discipline, they don't give them perspective, they don't give them direction.
You're
And
probably
it's the-
right.
And it's the issues because then kids go out and they commit crimes, they make mistakes, they don't know where to go, they don't know what they want to do, they don't know what they like, they don't know what to do, they don't know where they belong in life. And they're just shooting from the hip and they don't have anyone to help them protect the pistol, clean the pistol, and load the pistol. They're just shooting from the hip.
That's probably true. But You can't be 30 years old and still making that as an excuse why you're sitting in pain and suffering.
100%.
You're sitting in
I agree with you
you're
100%.
sitting in resentment and you're sipping and you're sipping on a fucking cup of victim.
No, I agree with you 100% in that regard, dude. I agree. And I value that my parents raised me the way I did and that I was able
And
to.
let's be real, 90% of people don't come from like that. I would say 10% or less probably have the parents that they fucking deserve and got.
And our
Most
parents-
people just don't get great parenting. It's facts.
So our parents were beautiful in many ways because, listen, I so value it now at 28 because I never could be where I am today without them being the free-spirited.
You just said you were abandoned.
I was totally.
After previous episodes on here, you said we had great parents and you're grateful for your parents. Now you're
feel
saying
like
we're
I was-
abandoned.
I totally feel like
We were abandoned.
I feel like a kid.
Not true.
I totally feel like a kid when I was growing up that had no parenting. That's just my opinion. That's my perspective. I didn't feel like I had any.
You
parenting.
also act like Solomon and you were easy kids to parent. You guys were fucking doing whatever the fuck you wanted and didn't want to listen to any authority.
Yeah, I know, dude, but I'm just saying I just shared my perspective. That's all I'm doing. And my perspective growing up as a child was I had no direction, no guidance, and no discipline. That's just my perspective.
That is your perspective. I understand.
So that's
from
my
my perspective,
perspective.
you and both my brothers didn't fucking want to do anything that anyone told them and did whatever the fuck they wanted and wouldn't listen to nobody.
Exactly. So it's also
That's
very,
my perspective.
It's very valuable insight to have, but ultimately, I mean, when a child is somewhat of a victim, let's face it. In America,
I'm not talking about children again. Once I said once you're 23
I
years
think
old.
some of the biggest victims.
I'm saying when you're 23 years old, you can't stop playing that card anymore.
I think some of the biggest
Up until
victims,
23, go ahead, use that card. I agree with you.
I think some of the biggest
And you're
victims
aware of
in
that.
the world are 100% children.
Of
They're
course.
the most vulnerable, susceptible, and individuals that are susceptible to being manipulated, whatever you want to call it, vulnerable, manipulation, and complete, just complete vulnerability as a child. So it's a great topic. It's a great conversation. I think
True.
it's really cool that we're talking.
But that's why I
about-
have so much compassion for young people. But that's why I think it's important once kids start to get to about 23, like I said, up to 22, I totally think I'll let someone play that card. But if I'm sitting with anyone who's 23 up and now, at that point, I try to tell that young person, like, hey, you can't use that anymore as your excuse. Like, I feel bad for you. Like, it sounds like what
So
you've
let's
been through is
talk about
fucked
this
up.
then. Direction and purpose, right? And direction, guidance, and purpose.
So that's how change can happen because
So-
they went through something
so
painful,
where does
but
it
they
tr-
can't use that their whole life
So
as an
where's
excuse.
a kid from 1 to 18 supposed to find purpose, direction, and guidance if he's not getting it from his parents?
Well, I think if he's not getting it from parents, then the next two things, which is really important, why I'm a big on sports and education, because if you have quality teachers in quality sports and school, a lot of students, that's what ends up being the difference. So if you talk to a lot of people that come from maybe bad homes, their experience, what made them go through, they share, and I've seen this, is that they had really good teachers and the educational systems and mentors through their teachers or paras at school and coaches within sports or certain programs that are related to school. Maybe it wasn't sports, maybe it was the chess club. But overall, sports and teachers, so coaches and teachers, all related to education really, are the next thing that can really make or break someone's life. That if they don't come from a perfect home or or their parents aren't there, like educational teachers and anything to do with high school and middle school and college.
I think
like
that's
those professionals by far. And I agree. Like I know for me, if we would have stayed in sports, that could have been a deciding factor because. What does sports do? It's a male role model or a female role model that's
And
teaching you
discipline,
discipline,
teamwork, unity,
communication,
cooperation.
and a great teacher is actually going to bring that into a classroom as well. So good teachers that I've had at high schools and college also bring those principles into their classroom. So I think if it's not parenting, it's great professionals in those fields that can have a vast impact because let's look at it. When you're young, you can be at school all day. Most schools, you can get there as early as 7 a.m. and be there till 9 o'clock at night. They have all these activities you can be a part of. So I think that's really important. But if you're growing up poor in inner city, you don't even have access to that if you're a poor black or minority going to schools that don't have those resources. Then you're fucked.
I think it's really,
now that you don't have access to those, you're fucked.
I think that's a really interesting point, understanding that our youth lack direction, guidance,
Yeah.
and they lack mentorship. And it's
Yeah.
a huge issue in America. People don't know. People are living for other people, and they're not living for themselves. They don't know. It's all about self-awareness because people are all living to work a job to make money to survive to get by because that's what everyone else is doing, and they're not self-aware and comfortable being different. And for me, my most valuable asset is my ability to be comfortable being different. For me, I've been comfortable being an outlier and an outcast from society because I'm happy. I'm happy having control of my time, living a minimalistic life, and doing what I love and making happiness the primary focus. But I have had to find that firsthand through fucking up over and over and over again. If I would have had a mentor like Gary Vaynerchuk when I was 12 or 11 or 10 or 9 or 13, it would have been incredible. Dad is
Assuming that you listened to them and you weren't still the same kid that didn't want to listen to anybody.
Dude, I loved hanging out with my dad when I was a kid. I loved playing tennis. I loved sports.
Yeah, and
So-
I think what you're saying is super important and key, but at the same time, no matter what you do, sometimes certain kids are just never going to listen.
There was a time that I was at Dad's house and I had to get pulled away because he was drinking in Fridley, and I didn't want to leave. Like, I loved playing sports. Our dad took us to do shit all the fucking time.
Yeah, I get what I'm saying, but what I'm saying, sometimes you have the greatest parents in the world, and whatever they do, their kid still ends up being a fuck up.
Totally, but I'm just saying, it's one of the biggest issues in America currently today.
Is parenting.
Is the lack of guidance and direction.
Well,
for
this
our
politics went from politics to parenting. That's
But
basically
this
what we're
is
talking
politics
about.
because ultimately, now let's bring it back to politics from the parenting. It's because ultimately, if you
Why?
think about it, what's a great example of politics and parenting? It's abortion. Abortion and politics and parenting. How can you say that I'm supposed to be? I have an obligation to raise my child and give him direction and purpose, but then I also have the right to kill that kid. To me, it's a great topic. We were debating this at the hospital recently, and if you're gonna slaughter a kid in the womb, but then sit here and say,
Well, first of all, you have to argue if what point that actually becomes an adult, what week.
but
That's a different discussion.
but
You
to
can't
have-
act like you're slaughtering someone in the womb when you
Well,
had
to-
sex,
well, to have
and a
self-
week later you're getting an abortion. I'm
There's no
sorry.
behavior
There's
that's
no
more selfish.
slaughtering in the womb.
There's
First of all,
no more-
but using the language slaughtering in the womb is very extreme when you don't even know when does the life begin.
Okay,
There's
dude.
a certain point when I think abortion should never, ever, ever happen in a million years. I agree with you.
There is
but I'm
no-
not going to use the word slaughtering in the
Okay, I
room
won't use the
when
word
it's been
slaughter.
2 weeks since the motherfucker has been born. It's a fucking sperm cell, and then you're taking a pill or doing a quick thing.
But there's a huge issue with all the fucking babies we're killing in America. Let's face it. If you're
Again, how
there's-
do you define when it becomes a baby, though? That's
I'm
another
just
question.
saying there's nothing more selfish or irresponsible than unprotected sex, and then solving that with abortion. To me, it is the root problem of America. It's selfish, egotistical, self-absorbed actions, then not taking responsibility for them. So I want to.
In that specific situation, but there's other reasons where women can get
I think
pregnant
that-
from a man that's like rape and sexual assault that has nothing to do with what you're saying.
Outliers, and you look at the percentages, that's like 1% or less of the instances of abortion. So I agree with you. I'm not positive on that number.
And you
but
definitely can't make abortion illegal. It's just impossible.
I think you should have a lifetime ban. I think you should have 1 to 2 to 3 strikes, and then you're done.
a woman?
100%. I think you should have access to it. I think you should have, but I think there should be a lifetime ban. Once you've had 2
If
or
you've had 3, yeah, if
you
you're
should
doing
be
more
done.
than 3 abortions, man.
If you're
But here's the
repeating-
deal. That's once again, that's oppressing women because how do they keep track of the man who's the one? Because you could have a guy fucking 20 women, and all different women. When does he have to take responsibility for getting a lifetime ban? You're putting that all on the women then. Let's look at that.
Yeah. And it's an interesting topic because if you look at the species of any sex or any species, the
So
women
you're
are the,
t- you're
the
talking
women,
about-
the women are the ones that select their breeding partners ultimately. If you think about men,
But
and
men
women.
seem to have the scapegoat more than anyone that because they don't want the baby, it doesn't happen.
But
they
scientifically,
influence.
if you audit a species, the women are the breeders. They select the mates that they sleep with. So they have the decision-making power. The men are the ones that are selected, not doing the selecting in any species or any animal kingdom.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I definitely think 3 would be fair because I think a lot of times most people don't have that many abortions in their life.
To me, it just says a
Most
lot.
people don't, though. You get what I'm saying? I don't think most
But
women.
to me, it says
I
a
don't
lot.
think most women have that many abortions. I think a lot of times it's just like 1 or 2 times throughout
Yeah,
their life.
well, let's look up the numbers here on how many abortions America has a year. And
I'm not
it's-
talking about
it is
overall.
pretty
I'm talking
disgusting.
about one woman having more than 1 or 2
Yeah.
abortions in life. It's probably
Yeah.
not that common.
Yeah, I know. I
You get what I'm
remember-
saying?
Yeah. I just think it's an interesting number and an interesting behavior that we can audit and learn to
Yeah,
grow
I
from.
get it, but I just don't see how you can make it illegal. These extreme right-wing religious people want to say, we're going to make abortion illegal. It's literally impossible. You want to know why? It's always going to happen. Abortion will always happen. And the rich people will always do it. If it's fucking illegal, guess what? Rich white people or rich any
A
race is still
million
going to do it.
babies were killed in 2017.
Once again, though, how do you define when it's a baby?
The report from the Guttmacher Institute, a research group that supports abortion rights, counted 862,000 abortions in 2017.
But how do they define which one of those when it becomes a baby? What weeks were they doing this at? Because there's a specific time that I think is fucked up, and there's times where it's so early in the process.
It's super interesting in a country that has all these freedoms and abilities that we kill so many babies. Like.
Yeah, I know. I mean, this is the number one reason why certain religious people always vote red. Is that
this is one of the most important political
in
topics.
Fact,
this is probably the most important political topic there is.
And listen here,
because
I really don't think certain people, politicians, actually care. I think they just make a stance because they know it's going to get them votes. That's how I think how fucked up our political system is. I really don't think some of these politicians really care about too much, but they know if they say what they say, they're going to get votes. Like, I really don't think Trump cares too much about abortion. I think he says that because he knows he's going to get all the votes from the religious people.
That's why Trump said back when he ran for office that if he ever ran, he'd run red. But ultimately, this is my point. This is what I want to say.
Yeah.
My point is this. Having been someone that was born not into the imperfect situation, it was imperfect, but it turned out beautiful. I'm thankful for my dad. I'm thankful for my mom. My dad has blessed me with amazing qualities. The majority of my qualities that I have, I get from my dad. They're amazing. He's intelligent. He's handsome. He's the hardest worker I've met. He's incredibly brilliant. He has a lot of amazing qualities. My mom also blessed me with a lot of amazing gifts. So, via being born in an imperfect situation and coming out of it and surviving and sustaining and growing and learning to sustain and evolve, I think it's the most valuable thing. So I think that strongest organisms come from the lowest of circumstances. If you think about it, it makes sense. If an organism can sustain through more and it establishes itself and sustains, it's going to be conditioned and it's going to be fit. Condition and fitness. So in that regard, you should say yes to more life. Because if there's more life, there's going to be a better chance that you're going to have more conditioned and fit species that sustain, that can then move the humanity forward. So in my point is scientific in all this, and it's the fact that there should be more life and more conditioning and more fitness via challenging circumstances that produce more conditioned and fit species.
Yeah, but really it comes down to like what you're saying is sounds all complex, but really the simple thing is if you're not ready to have a kid, you just shouldn't be having sex, man.
So that's my great.
That's really all it is.
This all gets really big.
It's just real simple, man.
No,
like,
it's not.
Yeah,
though.
sex
really
is good,
big.
but like
I disagree. It's really complex. It's one of the most complex topics, actually.
I don't think so.
Because I think it comes back then to also, I agree with you. I think it's the most selfish act.
It's simple. It's selfish people not thinking about their actions and don't realize that if they're not having sex without protection, that they could get someone pregnant.
So it summarizes everything I believe in.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that specific thing is not a complex issue. It's very fucking simple.
But the topic
Stop having
about
sex.
Abortion, it connects. It connects.
I know, but that topic itself is not a complex issue. It's really simple.
What one?
Abortion.
Actually,
simple.
it is, because how are you going to regulate people's freedom of sexual choice?
What? You're never going to be able to regulate it.
I mean, I disagree. When you say it's simple, I think it's the most complex topic that exists.
It's a simple problem. You're talking about a more complex solution to a simple problem. The problem is simple. You're saying that's complex of how you might offer a solution.
Yes.
That I understand. But the problem is not complex. The problem is really fucking simple.
Yeah, it's selfish, self-absorbed, ego run rampant. It's people that want to have sex with anyone, anywhere, anytime because they want to get off and feel good and get. It's basically like an addiction to
So
something.
the solution of it, I think, is trying to. Well, they have safe places which you can do it, which I think is needed. I think meeting in the middle is you can't make it illegal, but you also need to have some regulation where you can't just be doing abortions as many times you want for the rest of your life.
It's just interesting.
That to me just makes sense. It's like, okay, what's a simple. So that's why I look at solutions as not being that complex. People want to make it to be like, oh, you can't make it that simple. It's like, actually, you can give that a try. Like, we already have Planned Parenthood. Right wingers.
Arguably, it's never been easier to not have an abortion. Arguably, if you look at science of 2020, with all the available resources, you should have no reason to say that you had to have unprotected sex and get pregnant irresponsibly.
No, you could use a rubber,
I haven't used a rubber in years.
Well, I'm not going to get into whether or not I use a rubber, when and where, who.
Well, I'm just saying, I've never had a kid. It says a lot.
Some people just got weak pullout game.
I mean, I don't get it. I know people that have 4 kids and they're like 24 years old with 4 different women. It's like,
I don't know, man. I don't know, man. Like, maybe are they being the active father in their kid's life though? It's not bad.
No, not at all.
Well, I mean, then I don't understand that individual. You know, but the solution, like I said, it's a simple. The simple solution is to meet everyone in the middle, Because they're radicals.
I don't think it's simple, man.
Right.
I think it's a really interesting topic. I just don't see how you think this is simple.
I just think it's not as complex. I think everything in life isn't as complex as humans. Humans love to make complexities out of things that aren't as
Well,
complex.
I can articulate how it's complex.
I understand, but once again, articulation sometimes is complexing things that don't need to be complexed, in my opinion.
Well, there's a reason we struggle with this and have struggled with it our entire existence as a nation, and why we're still irrationally
Because
voting.
people can't meet in the middle.
But you're talking about it like
It's
you say
simple.
it's simple, but then we have irrationally voted
Because
on
people
this
don't want to
topic.
budge. Religious people want to make it fucking illegal and put people to prison. It's fucking ridiculous. It's only gonna fuck up women that are minorities the most.
So you just hit exactly what I want to.
You can't do that, and you can't have free rampant where you can have Planned Parenthood where anyone, anywhere, the rest of their life can go in there as many times as they want and have men do the same thing and fuck as many women as they want, never have a consequence. There needs to be a balance, and you offered a great middle ground, which is limiting the amount of times in your life you can have an abortion, tracking the data, making it safe, allowing certain individuals, and making it restrictive. When you hit certain weeks, it's then illegal. You can't have an abortion when you've gotten 80% through your pregnancy and the baby's already ready to be born in 8 weeks. Like, you can't do that. That's fucking ridiculous. But there's got to be a very specific set of timeline of the weeks and a number of times someone can have an abortion. I think that is very fair. That is regulated. And if someone then could be going to jail after that point.
But here's the thing.
So that eliminates the case. Well, what if someone's been raped? Like, well, I doubt someone's going to have 5 different women be raped 5 times. Like, that's possible.
And then you should probably start auditing yourself.
No, not even about that. But in that specific case, you could still work around that and realize maybe someone was a sex trafficking trade and they were like, there's ways to deal with that. Well, I'm not saying that person's going to be thrown in prison. So I'm just saying. But that would solve like 95% of the problem.
But ultimately, what you're talking about is actually really complex because guess what? It's fictional story manipulation. We're talking about religion, folks, and we're talking about a species that is still
religious
living.
people are never going to vote for it anyways. Like, my whole point is still never going to happen because we're so far at the end of the spectrum. But just logically, a sane human being that's not super biased is going to be like, let's give that a run.
But
let's give that a try.
In general, as a species, my point is this, folks, is religion, the most basic species concepts of all time is sex and death. Think about it. When a species, back when they're cavemen, they say, smash skull, I kill you, I'm more superior, I'm more alpha. And they say, I have sex more, I'm more alpha. It's like the most basic, innate animal instincts is sex, reproduction, and survival and sustainability. So ultimately, as a species, we need to look at that and say, okay, we need to evolve. We're at times now where we should be able to move beyond religion concepts and ideologies and innate sexual species sex drive. Like, we should be able to, as species now, not be so elementary and like, it's 2020, folks. We don't have to let sex be we don't need to keep reproducing to build our size. We are big enough. We're huge.
Well, Bill Burr thinks we should kill 80% of the population.
That's why I think it's a great topic.
He thinks that politicians talk about it behind the scenes but won't say
100% agree. 110% agree.
He thinks they're going behind the scenes going, okay, what are we going to do about this population problem?
Gary
But
Vee,
none of them have the balls to go out and say it as part of their political campaign. But there will be a day
I'm saying right
when
now,
the political campaigns will
I'll
come
say it
out and they're
right
going to be
now.
like, what are we going to do about this population control? Because if we don't do something, it's going to be... And they could be like, let's start
false
another...
environments.
Well, they might be like, let's inject a virus into the population like the corona.
No, but look at the false environments. A lot of people.
That is probably what will happen. It'll be another pandemic, but it's been the government will probably inject it.
Let's dive into the science of that.
Kill the population because we can't sustain our
false environments. If you think about law and legislation, you can look at this, folks. It's meant to be implemented to prevent catastrophes.
I love Bill Burr.
But ultimately, I agree. COVID, if you remove the law and legislation that drove people to their houses and to be quarantined, there would have been more death, pain, and suffering. I 100% agree with Bill Burr and disagree with creating false environments. I believe in letting science run its course. And
Well, that's not what he's talking about. He's like purposely trying to kill 80% of the... He's saying they purposely need to kill 80% of the population.
yes, you would purposely stop implementing legislation that does so. So, like, when the president implemented quarantines, I was sitting in Honolulu and reading about it and auditing and thinking, because I was sitting there thinking, what would move the species?
They're never going to announce
well,
that,
though. Let me say this, though. I was sitting in Honolulu, and I was just watching this happen, and I thought, what would move our species forward the most? what would force us to grow and evolve the most? And it would be more pain, death, and suffering. So I thought, oh, the president who's red implementing law and legislation to force you to quarantine is actually doing himself a favor because it's limiting the pain and suffering and the death and loss and trauma that keeps people from wanting to go out and motivate change and growth and evolution. So I was sitting there auditing these concepts and ideologies, and I was like, that's really interesting. Basically, false environments keep us from growing.
Yeah, I mean, but that's Bill Burr's just saying a simple fact that we can't sustain our population, and that behind the scenes, they're having conversations. The 1%, the wealthy that run this planet, politicians, are saying, "What are we going to do about this population?" They're looking at the next 100 years. What are we going to do? He's jokingly, because he's a comedian, says they don't have the balls to say this, what they're going to say as part of their platform. And they're never going to go out there and do that. They're never going to, what you described will happen, but it's not going to be promoted because the media would have a public backlash. But deep down, they're trying to figure out ways to do that, which sounds as crazy and fucked up as it is. The reality is, that's why Elon Musk is trying to create a multi-planet species, because he knows that we can't sustain it. So, and the reason why I think he says 80% is because 80% of the population basically they're like you're saying, artificial intelligence can replace 80% of the population. Because 80% of the population is doing things that really, their skills are not really useful. They're just robots, basically, that go to work,
the droids,
feed themselves. They don't really they don't exercise anymore. Let's look at that. Let's look how lack of conscious species we are. We stop working out by the time we're 18.
It's conditioning and fitness.
Yeah, but we're conditioned this way. Like, we are conditioned all this way because it's through the people that are in power know if they make things easier for us that we're conditioned to be.
So you're making the point that
But I know, but listen, but this is
all
crazy.
Going to lead into exactly why
I understand. I know it's why, but this is different things. But I just can never be conservative. It's just.
But you're leading into everything. I'm
some topics I can be. I understand some topics, but what I'm trying to say is, people never learn. They stop exercising. They stop eating healthy. They stop reading books and growing their brain.
Comfort,
they stop praying
and stuck like an addiction.
Yeah, I understand that. Let me explain myself. So if you stop doing all those things and you become a person who lives a lifestyle where you're not doing any of that, not only that, you're going to work and doing a job which requires no brain activity. 80% of the population essentially are walking, talking people that could be replaced by a robot doing the same thing.
Shout out to the Recovery Atheist. That was a great episode we did. We talked about that recently.
And that's what Bill Burr jokingly says when he says we need to wipe out 80%, because he already consciously understands that concept, and he's a comedian, so he probably analyzes it. But he's saying it in a very funny, simple way. But comedians probably, when they make jokes, they analyze all this shit and they make jokes about it, because comedians are the most consciously aware people, and that's probably why they're so dark and use drugs, but they use the comedy to brighten it up. Because they are so aware. Comedians are hyper aware. And that will fuck you up. Like, if you're so hyper aware of the dark brim future of humanity on certain things, the only way to get through that is to joke around and maybe use a few alcohol, drink a little.
From Hong Kong.
You get what I'm saying?
Hello, Farouz.
If you look at a lot of comedians, they're hyper smart and hyper aware of things.
We have an audience,
and they make jokes about them.
We have a fan from Hong Kong that just said hi.
Nice. So yeah, I mean that's a topic that we can get into, and it's like, I think naturally though, like you're saying, I don't think anyone needs to do that. I think naturally.
Good evening.
I think naturally a virus will come back. It's bigger, like we talked about, and just naturally wipe people out. It'll naturally happen through evolution because we're, like you said, we're going into places that we naturally shouldn't be going into, and that's creating us getting exposed to certain viruses or animals, and that's it's just going to naturally happen. Our planet will naturally will cause that. Like, I don't think an evil person in our government or in the behind the scenes is going to be like, hey, like Darth Vader. I think it's just going to naturally happen through evolution and the planet saying, fuck you, I'm going to spit you back out, because the planet was along here before humans evolved into being humans.
Actually, I disagree. I think we're a species and an organism like anything like a tree or like a leaf.
It doesn't need us, though. The planet doesn't need a species or organism to survive. Us.
I personally want to...
We don't.
I challenge you to dive into the scientific concepts and ideologies of evolution, conditioning, fitness, growth.
We don't need... But how can you argue the planet needs us to survive? It doesn't need us. The planet does not need us to survive. It's a self-sustaining organism itself. Does not need humans to... The planet does not need us at all.
So my point is this.
At
So
all.
ultimately, my point of all this is that if you look at everything in a scientific lens, right? And my point of all this is the fact that ultimately the solution to all of this is freedom. Just hear me out on this. Because law and legislation, when it implemented, creates false environments. And when you create false environments, it conditions stagnant. It pushes people to be stagnant, stuck, and not challenge themselves, condition themselves to grow via fitness and conditioning. And as a species, we need to condition and build ourselves up for fitness in every different arena of life. So ultimately, that requires freedom. That requires pain. That requires suffering. That requires failure. That requires all of this because that's where the conditioning and the fitness is built up. If you want to give away free fish or a universal basic income, people are going to be comfortable and stagnant and stuck. They're not going to be pushed to fail and have pain and suffering and experience trauma, loss, and pain, which it's been proven, pain and suffering is the number one motivator of change and growth. So ultimately, when you look at this concept as a species in a scientific lens, the fastest way forward as evolution and growth of a species is more pain and suffering. It's really interesting when you realize this, and then during a COVID time, see a president that's a 1%er implement law and legislation that actually is helping him. Because listen, if he doesn't implement, the answer is less restrictions. Because the less restrictions, the more pain and suffering, the more revolution you see. So, if people would have had more pain and suffering, death and loss from the pandemic, like a 30% death, President Trump would have zero chance of being reelected. If you had COVID and times it by 30 right now, Trump would have zero chance of being reelected. Zero.
Of course, anybody would be zero elected if they had that bad.
Exactly. So the answer is less restrictions, less comfort.
I don't know. It's not working out for the U.S. But every other country has gotten the coronavirus under control except for us. So
I think it's actually beautiful. I think it's the solution. I think it's where you're going to see the unity and the cooperation and the growth and the evolution.
You can't just let people die, though.
Yeah, it's a really crazy topic. It's a really interesting.
You just
concept.
can't do that. It's just not.
Why can't you? Why can't you just let species and science?
Because people vote people into leadership roles as an honor. You swear as a president to put an oath down that you'll protect the people. You can't knowingly just let things happen. I get what you're saying, but at the same time, you just can't do that. It's just not. It would never work in the eyes of the public eye. You would be impeached. You would be sent to prison. Like, it would just never work.
Well, here's the point. What you're talking about is fictional stories. It's human rights and law and legislation. It's a
just
concept.
Never happen.
It's a concept we create. So this can constantly change, and it is constantly changing. Like, we have gay marriage now, and in 30 years, I'm sure things will be completely
Other countries
different.
haven't been less restrictive.
But law and
they've solved
legislation
it.
and human rights can change. So I kind of hear what you're saying, but at the same time, I'm going to represent the other end of the spectrum and say that it can go somewhere I'm going. Because ultimately, that's where... I mean, that's all. We create our own law and legislation. Every society creates their own fictional stories. They choose their money, they choose how it looks, they choose their human rights, and they choose the principles with which their people operate on. And it's all fictional stories. So I personally think that there's no limit for law and legislation, and I personally think I believe in less. But that's why I believe in less law and legislation. That's why I believe in conservatism, and I think America.
Every situation is different, though. That's the thing I don't like about conservatism. You can't compare one industry and one regulation to another. Like, I do believe there should be less regulation in certain things. But you can't have just free regulation across all industries, across all spectrums, and just be like, fuck you, it's a free enterprise. It's like, that's how we've got to where we are today. So I think in certain sense, I get what you're saying, but everything needs to be looked at differently. You can't look at the healthcare system, the educational system, our military systems, our food systems, our farming systems, our social programs. You can't just look at all of them in the same and like just give them the same regulation or the same deregulation. Every system's different. In certain systems, it's going to be better to have less regulation. But the rooted philosophy that a lot of people are just rooted in and they believe in, they're just like, no government control for nothing. Nothing, never, ever.
I agree 100%.
It's like, that's a brainwashing that the 1% have brainwashed people to
think,
vote for them because they're voting against themselves.
Actually, I disagree. I think it's the opposite. I think they brainwash you to think you need law and legislation so that then they can control the people with the law and legislation. I completely disagree. I think law and legislation is to manipulate and control the majority of the people.
No, law and legislation is
100%.
created so it's
That's
not
what-
like the fucking Wild West where you can murder someone and get away with it.
So here's my point. I'm going to make this.
Yeah, how was America before we implemented government and law and legislation? You could have a gun and kill whoever the fuck you wanted to.
My point is, we think egotistically.
That's crazy,
We
you
think
think that.
we're more of like an elite species when really we're just an organism in a species that's basic like everything.
No, I
else.
don't think we're an elite species.
Yeah, we do. We think we need all these different rules and regulations and everything when really we're just an organism in an environment.
I don't think we're an elite species, if that's what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying. We're just another average organism within another environment and arena. That's what I'm saying. So we don't need all these crazy law and legislation things. Why don't we just let the species run its course and and see how we interact with our
Because then
environment?
it's survival of the fittest, and then people just murder each other like the Wild West. Like I said, if you don't create
I'm
that,
not
it's mass
talking
murder.
about that extreme, dude.
That's what would happen, though.
No, it wouldn't.
Yeah, it would.
No, it wouldn't.
We're a barbaric,
You would
primal
still have
instinct.
law and order. You'd still have law and order. 100%.
No, he wouldn't. No, he wouldn't.
This is what the conservative.
If you didn't have gun regulation, everyone has guns, and anyone can kill anyone with no consequences of
But
law.
you can also stand your ground and protect yourself. My point is, we're basically.
If we didn't have law where you went to prison for murdering someone in regulation, it would be a mass murder. It would be like fucking purge all the time.
All right, man. Well, that's not what I'm getting at.
That's what would happen, though.
No, it isn't.
If you removed law and regulation for people, that's what would happen.
No, you wouldn't.
Guaranteed.
Donald Trump is doing it right now, and it's the solution.
If you removed all law and regulation and anyone could do whatever the fuck they wanted, you could
not
kill
saying that.
someone and no one can force you to do any consequence unless they can come up to your house and hang you like in the Wild West or shoot you down.
Dude, you're thinking so elementary about it, dude. It's 2020.
That's what would happen, though,
No, it
bro.
isn't, dude. We can use the modern technology and be conservative in an evolutionary modern day fashion. So we can be basic, lacking.
You still need some form of government control.
Okay, so what's your solution to getting people out of their comfort zone, being stagnant and stuck? Giving them free money?
I never said that at all.
So how are you going to condition and fitness the species that we are and make us more
That's
fit?
going into government, creating policies that's really emphasized on education.
Okay,
so it's lack of
So now
education.
you're exactly making my point. Using law and legislation to control the people.
Not control.
That's what you just said. The law
Not
and
controlling.
legislation would
To
then
give
be-
them the
it
opportunity
would
to have
be-
better education.
So you're dictating how exactly.
Because the education system we have now is not rooted in helping people.
Well, my point is my experience, right?
How are you supposed to have a better education, Josh? We need to educate our
I
people.
can tell you firsthand. I just had a debate with a PhD student at the hostel last night. Shout out to Hostel Du Nord and Bob Monahan. And he was blown away at my insight and perspective as a high school dropout. And guess what? I'm just an average, basic Joe.
I understand, but
species.
you agree that we need better education in our country.
Anyone could have my perspective if you're willing to fucking fail and lose
Dude,
and try.
but you're
and
not. You're
risk.
missing the point.
No, I'm not. You're missing the
No,
point.
you are. Do we need better education? Yes or no?
No,
Sister.
I disagree. We need more people that are willing to take
So our
risks.
education isn't broken.
No, dude, I didn't have.
Is our
I-
education system broken?
I
Yes
have
or no?
no education.
That's the point.
I didn't go to college. I didn't go to high school. I skipped half of middle school.
Education is the number one system that needs
I think
revolutionized.
education is the system that's controlling the people.
That's why you implement a better system.
No, I disagree. That's how human. That's going to be in an ego and personalities and shit and control.
That's already controlled. It's controlled right now.
The less.
It's already controlled and driven by
That's
the 1%.
why you remove the control and then.
So how do you? What's the solution then to do that with education?
You build people up to take risks and be self-confident and be happy in doing something they love.
Well, you apparently just did not follow the advice and suggestions what the guy said on Joe Rogan's podcast that says what he would do with kids and educational systems by training them better to be entrepreneurs.
100% experiences.
But they're still having structured educational systems still. You can't remove a structured educational system.
Yeah, you can. You can just have them experience things.
But what he was talking about was having an educational system that's structured, that's geared towards creating entrepreneurs rather than employees.
Okay, so look at my story, right? If I took we took an organism that was like us, and we put it in every
But
environment.
you still
that I
need to
went
have
through.
some form
But
of
here's my
structure
point.
in your educational
I'm giving
system.
you a point. I'm giving
That
you an
needs to be
example.
regulated.
Completely remove education and just start giving them environments and arenas. So take them and take a kid like I've been through. All right, so I'm gonna name all the arenas and different places I've been.
That's still education, though. You're still creating an environment.
There's no control manipulation. You just give them a brief period.
I'm not talking about any control manipulation.
I'm just talking about.
You still need someone to facilitate that. That'd be a teacher.
No, it wouldn't. You would just put them in different arenas.
Who's facilitating it?
It's just part of the course. It's like a 6-month course, and you would just have them taste every different environment.
But you still
It
have
wouldn't-
someone facilitating that.
It would just be putting them in a natural arena and environment and having absorbing the stimuli in the qualitative and quantitative environment.
But you
within
still
that
have
environment.
someone facilitating that. That would be considered a teacher.
So this is my point. So
That's
take
my
a
point.
species and have them go through the stuff. So think about the species that would be the most conditioned and fit. They're going to be the one that's been through the most variation of arenas and environments. So take these individuals, and if they're, it ultimately is really elementary. It's basic species and evolution. And if you want to start creating all these laws and legislation that keep them from being hurt or having pain or scraping their knee or failing or losing, that's exactly the problem. We are soft. We are weak. We have not struggled. We have not strifed. We have not failed in a long time. Americans are used to just sitting in their fucking house, watching a little bit of fucking Netflix. They're not out there living life, tasting arenas, traveling, exploring, adventuring like our ancestors did, and they struggled, and they fought for food, and they fought for survival. I think you need to put us in more challenging, difficult situations consistently. And I think that's the complete opposite of implementing law and legislation that controls people and keeps them from being challenged, failing.
The lack of law and regulation allows people to still control and manipulate people, though. That's the point, too.
But law and legislation is a great example of controlling and manipulating.
That's another way that the 1% want you to believe that when they're actually running around controlling and manipulating people without having regulation.
I disagree.
You can argue both ways,
I
bro.
disagree. I haven't had any. The president and I have zero. Like in America, I have all the freedom in the world, the fucking world. But yeah, I think it's a great topic.
On a very selfish individual level, you do, yes.
Yeah, I just think it's a great
But
topic.
they will never allow anyone to have enough leverage to actually change the fucking way the system is designed to keep the rich richer. It's designed to keep them that way.
Because of the law and legislation.
They create it that way because there is no law and regulation
So you
to
see
get
the
above
evil.
them.
That's the evil I'm talking about.
But it's not rooted in the government. It's rooted in the money that the wealthy have to not want people to come in and create laws and regulation that actually even the playing field.
Totally. I think it's a great topic. I think it's
The system's rigged. The playing field is not real. The game is rigged. The game you're playing, you can't win.
Disagree. So you might as well just quit. Why don't you just quit? Why don't you go relocate?
It's easy to think like that.
You should just go relocate and quit then, dude.
It's easy to think like that, yeah.
You should. You don't have any chance. It's rigged. You don't have a chance.
No, and that's why you got to get into politics and government and change policy and create new legislation
I
that's
completely
better.
disagree. Coming from a guy that's had a moving company that he slept out of the back of his moving truck, I think there's more freedom and opportunity and abundance in America than any other country in the world. And when Gary Vee says there's abundance in America and there's unlimited access to success, I 100% agree.
I'm not denying that, but I'm also
I
saying it's an illusion where they don't really let the people that want to have change. It's still rigged in a way that keeps people oppressed and not gives everyone, a fair shot when it comes to certain systems with our educational systems, our healthcare systems, the way laws are implemented that definitely attack more
I
people
think you're
from
just
minorities.
rationalizing people that aren't fucking taking risks.
I'm giving you the
listed a bunch
history of America.
You just listed a bunch of variables that would have been a way of rationalizing someone not being conditioned and fit and having success. So it's interesting because you talk about a parent, right? So let's lean into this quickly.
I'm just saying.
But no,
here's
let me
the
say this. I want to compare.
It's
this
an
because
illusion. Less regulation is an illusion that you
But-
have of freedom. It's an illusion.
I wanna talk
They
about
are
this.
still running shit behind the scenes, doing whatever the fuck they want, influencing their money to actually create laws that benefit them.
All right, well, I'm challenging you. So
they
here's
can
the
run the
challenge.
industries and control
America's
the industries.
government law and legislation is like the parent of the parent, right? So look at here. This is essentially how I'm going to challenge what you said earlier. You said earlier that you said parents aren't to blame, right? The child is the
100% not to blame.
Okay,
It takes
so it's
two
the
to
same with
tango.
the government.
Yeah, you can't blame 100%
It's the
the government.
exact same relationship.
You can't put all the blame on them, and you can't put all the blame on the consumer either.
But
It's a
earlier
50-50.
you were saying the kid has to take responsibility for their actions
At some point.
and their decisions.
Of course, just
That's
like
the exact same relationship.
Of course.
When you have to take responsibility for your actions and your decisions and the decisions you make to go to college or to fit in or to be like everyone else.
Of course.
You can't blame the government.
I'm not 100% blaming the government.
But it's just interesting from that
But the
perspective,
government isn't
because
creating policies that are
But based on these two perspectives,
But a
you're,
good parent's
you're kind
trying.
of backwards on both of those.
No, I'm not, because a
Yeah, you are.
parent's actually going to try to help their kids, not limit them.
But you're kind of
good
backwards.
parent.
You're auditing the government and saying it's them, but in the
It's
parent.
not 100% the government.
But in
though.
the parent-child relationship, you're saying it's the child.
No, I'm not. You're not listening to me.
When we just
It
just
takes
talked
two to
about that.
tango. That's what I just said.
But earlier when we talked about the
It's not
parent-child,
100% on anybody.
You said it was more my fault. You're like, you made those fucking decisions. You were a terrible kid.
It's not what
You
I
were-
said.
you were- yeah,
it's not what I
yeah, it
said.
was.
No, I never said you
You
were
said
a terrible
I
kid.
never would listen to anyone, and I made those decisions. I had to take
I
responsibility.
said
for
at
it.
some point you have to realize that no one forced you to do those things.
Exactly. So now use that same perspective for the government and the people within the government.
Of course, it's the same thing. Yeah, I'm not trying to say that.
But you didn't mention that when you were talking about it. You
didn't ask me though.
I know, but you were auditing the government end of it. You didn't look at it like
Well,
that.
you didn't ask me to talk about the other side of it.
Oh yeah, that's interesting to me.
We weren't talking about the other side. I'm not saying that people should get free rides and not be accountable for their lack of effort or their lack of taking accountability, that they don't know that they're depressed because they fucking rack up credit cards or whatever. But again, like, the government has to have like systems in place that aren't purposely trying to hold people down. Like, it's the same thing. If you had a parent that was purposely trying to hold their kid down, that's what I'm saying. Like, if you look at that relationship,
But dude, that's what I'm saying, Zay.
the government's purposely trying to hold
You're not
people
listening
down.
to what I'm saying then.
Yeah, I am.
No, you're not, because the false environment is holding people down.
I understand that.
Giving me a free paycheck every week.
I'm not
is holding
talking about
down.
giving you a paycheck. That's
I
nothing
know
I'm
you're
talking
not.
about.
I'm giving you an
You're
example.
giving an extreme example, and that's
No,
not
I'm
what I'm talking about.
I'm giving you an example of false environments.
I'm not trying to say anyone should have a free
creating an
paycheck.
arena of soft, gentle.
I'm not talking about creating an arena of soft or gentle.
Yes, law and legislation that limits pain and suffering is what you're talking about.
No, I'm not.
You're talking about more blue policies than red, which is more government and less pain and suffering.
I'm talking about policies that are created
For the people.
that aren't rooted in keeping people oppressed.
But that's exactly what the blue party is. You don't see it.
Don't see what?
The blue party is oppressing.
How are they oppressing?
By keeping people stuck and stagnant in comfort zones.
I'm not saying
Because
that.
if I have a comfort and I'm comfortable, I'm never going to go out and taste and challenge myself and grow and condition and fit. I'm going to sit in this little comfort stagnant zone where the government gives me my health care, my education, my basic little life, and I have this enough little money to get by, and I'm just going to sit comfortable.
Not what I'm talking about at all.
And I'm going to have everything. I'm not going to have any pain and suffering, and my life is perfect.
It's not what I'm saying.
That's what you are saying.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, you want law and legislation that keeps people from having struggle and strife.
No, it's not what I'm saying. That's what you're saying. You're putting those words in your mouth.
So then what are you saying you want?
I just told you every industry needs to be looked at differently and how you regulate it. So what are you saying? I mean, I already told you, like, our educational system and healthcare system, those programs should have better, they need to be changed. Our healthcare system is designed to keep people sick, not actually make them help them to get healthy. Healthcare systems that we have in America is so much designed to get paid to make people sick, because if people are healthy, we don't make money anymore. For example, doctors are paid for fee-for-service in America, not other countries.
But dude,
so they get an incentive.
Once again, you're caught up in the variables, dude. Look at the science of it. The science of it. False environments, comfort, stagnant, conditioning, and fitness. I'm talking about the concept.
I'm talking about how policies are rooted in keeping people sick and keeping people
general,
oppressed.
Just keep it basic. Don't get too complex with it.
I'm not getting complex.
You are.
I'm talking about each issue.
No,
you just said that you're blue on certain issues like education.
Yes.
So I'm talking about
make it as general and simple as possible, right?
Each industry is completely different. I'm gonna have a different opinion on my opinion.
But you always talk about simple. Keep it simple, right?
Yeah.
So blue and red. Let's make it as simple as possible for everyone.
Yeah.
And blue, more comfort, more easy life, more less pain and suffering.
Not how I would define it. No.
Dude, so let's do it. I'm on camera. We're live. Let's do it. I want to hear you in the simplest form compare blue versus red politics. Lack of governance versus more governance. Correct?
Let's look at this. Pull it up. Let's look at the facts. You look up conservative values.
No, it's lack of governance versus more governance. And what you're talking about is a government for the people that helps keep pain and suffering from occurring, and conditioning and fitness.
That's not what I'm saying.
That's exactly what the blue party is.
Conservatism is a political and social philosophy characterized by respect for American traditions, republicanism, support for Christian values, moral univism, pro-business, opposition to trade unions, which trade unions are fucking amazing, first of all, strong national defense, free trade, anti-communism, pro-individualism, not pro-collectivism and community, advocacy.
I'm all about individualism. You should all pursue your individual happiness.
Actually, you're wrong. We've talked on multiple episodes, but you're saying you're pro-community and pro-collectivism.
Yes, but that all starts with individual self-awareness.
Individuals, advocacy of American exceptionalism, and a defense of Western culture from the perceived threats of socialism and moral relativism. As with all major American political parties, liberty is a core value. American conservatives generally consider individual liberty within bounds of American values. So That's what conservative
Sounds
values.
pretty amazing to me.
So let's look at
But my point is, you're making it complex, Isaac. I'm just asking you, as smart as you
so
are.
liberal
Dana,
values.
compare red
liberal-
versus blue and make it as simple as possible.
Liberalism
dude.
is a
You're just
political
making it
and
so
moral.
fucking difficult.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, you are. You're reading a.
You
fucking-
asked me to describe what the
I'm
two
asking
values
you to
are.
simply audit them, and it's one's more government and one's less. Is it not?
That's what, if you want to break it down
As
to.
simple as possible.
Okay, that's what you want to break it down to, yes.
Okay, exactly. Because simple the better. It's easier. Kindergartner, like you said, kindergartner.
Yeah.
All right, so blue versus red. More government, less government. All right, and then the other correlation would be helping people more versus helping them less, correct?
Helping them more or helping them less?
Yes.
So who would be helping them more?
The
and
blue.
Who would be helping them more?
Helping the people, the inequality, yes.
You could say that, I guess.
Yep. So, boom. So now we have it simple. Helping them more, and for the people, more government. And less government, less help for the people, more pain and suffering, and more conditioning and fitness. And instead, on this end, it's more help, more government for the people, less pain, less suffering, less conditioning and fitness.
I wouldn't necessarily define it as less pain, less suffering, less conditioning.
Well, if
fitness,
you,
though.
technically, if you limit the variables that someone can experience.
I would break it down to conservatism is rooted in less government. The best example is less
Do you see what
government,
I
more
just
government.
said, though?
I do what you're saying,
Do you see what I'm saying?
but I don't agree with that.
That's science. That's facts.
I don't agree with it.
You don't agree with science?
It's not what I'm saying.
That's what you just said.
I'm saying I
those
would
are
agree.
Science, those are evolutionary characteristics. Conditioning and fitness, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, is scientific. A species, an organism, when it's conditioned and fit, is more likely to sustain. So if you are about sustainability and
But
you are about,
but they're not trying to condition people and sustain them. They're trying to keep them oppressed, though.
That's what you're trying to talk about. You're talking about that you're about conditioning and sustainability of a
I'm
species.
talking about I don't believe in people keeping people oppressed. It's not helping them. How is that conditioning them and helping them?
It's just so interesting how people don't see this.
How do you think that's okay? How do you not see that free regulation is rooted in oppression and keeping people oppressed from having any chance of ever getting out of that?
How don't you see what I'm saying?
I do see what you're saying, but I still think that's a philosophy that's wrong.
It's my firsthand experience.
I still think that philosophy is wrong where you think not having government that can help people have an even playing field when the game is rigged
We're
and
an
that
organism.
capitalism
It's
is
not rigged,
rooted
dude.
capitalism is rooted in oppression.
Gary
Capitalism is rooted in oppression. Facts.
Law and legislation is oppression at its finest.
No, it's not.
100%. It withholds pain and suffering from taking place. It withholds and limits conditioning and fitness.
No, it doesn't.
It puts people in stuck and stagnant
No, it
positions.
doesn't. That's only if you create laws on purpose to do that.
That's what the Blue Party does. They want to give people a free UBI. Andrew Yang wants to give everyone $1,100.
I'm not talking about that specific issue.
That's a great example. That's what
I don't agree with that
A bunch
one.
of people are about giving away $1,100 to everyone.
I'm not
I
agree-
think that would be the worst thing to do for people.
I don't
in
agree with
America.
the UBI. I've never said that once. So
But that's a blue concept.
Well,
That's
I don't
for the
agree with that
people.
concept.
Well, that's the hierarchy of needs. That's meeting. That's.
I don't agree with that concept.
So let's look at the hierarchy of needs, folks.
I'm not-
Hierarchy of needs is when a species has.
I'm not agreeing with everything a blue party
Scientific.
has, bro. I'm not agreeing with everything on their side. Again, I'm a pretty moderate central person. I agree with some right conservative values. But what I don't agree at its core is that what I truly believe that the deregulation is not rooted in the greater good of people. Deregulation is rooted in having the wealthiest run free capitalism to keep people poor and oppressed with not naturally wanting to help them grow and teach them skills to be self-sustained.
I
It's
think
rooted
on
in
the
oppression.
individual. I disagree. I think it's on the individual, just like you said, the fucking kid. It's on the citizen. I disagree 100%.
Not 100% on them, though.
It's just 100%. It's just like the kid that fucks up. You said it.
I didn't say it was 100% on them.
You said you have to own it.
Not 100%.
You have to own it. You said
At
I
some
have to own
point.
it.
Not a 14-year-old. I'm talking about an adult.
So all these Americans have to own their fucking pansy-ass lifestyles.
Of course, people have to
Have to
own.
own it.
But it's not. But the system is rigged. Even people that aren't even not people that are owning their lifestyle, bro. I'm not saying that those people shouldn't own it. You're right. We do have soft people. We do have people that have no accountability for their own actions. I agree with you, just like kids do. But what I'm saying is it'd be like putting in a parent where the parent is purposely trying to oppress their kid from growing.
I disagree 100%.
That's what I'm saying is what's happening.
I can go on and on about this and use scientific concepts, and you will not be able to disprove science. It's just the science of it.
It's only my perspective. It's
spent-
not right or wrong, Josh. It's just my perspective.
Science is actually not right or wrong.
Well, like you say, we're not right or wrong here on We're Media. This is only our perspective.
Totally. But
Only
science,
my perspective.
But being
not right or wrong.
But science is right and wrong.
Well, now you're changing the subject because you're the one who preaches right perspective every fucking day.
But evolution.
You say science gets disproved all the time as well. You
But
say that.
evolutionary
You
thing-
say that
evolution-
science gets disapproved.
Evolution is not changing. It's not. Evolution does not change. A species and the way a species evolves.
Science doesn't get disproved.
Theories and concepts, but evolution is the one that's never changed. The conditioning and the fitness of a species or an organism is never changed.
Okay.
It's never. It never
I still
will.
think deregulation is rooted in oppression, and so is capitalism.
So conditioning and fitnessing of a species.
Of course,
and
people need.
organism will
There's
never change.
tons of people out there that no matter what you do, they're going to make excuses. I agree with you on that. I'm not asking anyone to have a free ride, but like certain laws that are against trade unions, like how the fuck is that? That's fucked
Well, I
up.
challenge people. Anyone that's
What's wrong with trade unions?
Well,
that
I
fucking
challenge
helps people
though.
and creates fair
But
wages.
my point is this: I challenge people to look into the science of it. Look into the science of evolution, growth, pain, suffering, and motivation, where people then start to take more risks, have more self-awareness, have more success because they're self-aware, they've had success, they've had failures, and they condition themselves to take on more risk and more failure. And most people in America never take a risk, they never take a chance, they're just stuck in a comfort of their life, and there's comfort and stagnant in their life, and they don't never condition or fitness themselves. They're just an organism that's not growing. They're just law and legislations keeping them from having pain and suffering, when really as a species we're about having conditioning and fitness. That's all I got. That's what I'm about in science. So I challenge everyone to look into the science of it and the conditioning and the sustainability of a species. And to me, that's what this is all about. It's about the sustainability of a species. Is it not?
So you could say, yeah.
So to me, that's why I challenge everyone to look into the science of it.
Yeah.
Dive deep into the science of this.
Yeah.
Because I've spent hours and hours and hours diving into the science of evolution and the concepts correlating them back to law and legislation.
Yeah.
So that's why
That's
I'm
good.
so passionate about that. But yeah, it is just my perspective ultimately. At the end of the day, I can see people being blue, I can see people being red. I'm both. I have concepts I'm blue on, concepts I'm red on. So it goes both ways. But in general, I've learned to be a big fan of freedom. Freedom to fail.
Yeah.
Freedom to suffer. Freedom to have pain.
It's freedom. It's only a limited freedom to a certain extent.
I don't know, man. I haven't. Being a guy that's an ex-drug addict, that's had brain surgery, that's been to jail and arrested for several crimes, I have all the opportunity in the world.
You're also not someone who comes from certain backgrounds. Like you're not a black person. You have white privilege.
Yeah, and also
That's actually real.
racist. Actually, here's the point. I talked to someone.
White
the other day.
privilege is so
Shout
real.
out-
It's not even funny, bro.
Shout out to my homeboy Derek Smith, who I had on the show recently from Louisiana. He's from the Deep South. I had him on the show, and he goes, he's like, you know what's interesting about you? He goes, you're white and you have the black circumstances. He goes, you probably have dealt with racism your whole life, and I said, yeah, that's a fucking brilliant perspective.
Well, you haven't dealt racism. No, you
Because
haven't.
people look at me and they don't think I've ever been to prison or jail. They don't think I've grew up with a single mom on welfare. They don't.
Yeah,
think
but that has nothing to do with race.
100%.
No, it doesn't.
People look at me and they don't think I've been through black circumstances.
Well, it's nothing to do with black circumstances.
Yeah, you're talking about injustice or
That's
like,
That's a racist statement. Black circumstances.
yeah.
You're not black. You can't go through fucking black circumstances. You're fucking white.
I'm talking
Point.
about the
Period.
suppression of them.
It
Jail.
has to do with
Lack
being
of
black.
education,
You're
drug
not
addiction.
black. You can never know to have. You can't
I'm
have.
not saying
You
that.
have. You've never been through black circumstances because you're fucking white.
I'm
You've
talking
never
about-
been
I'm
pulled
talking
over
about-
because you're fucking black. You can't be called a
I've been
nigger.
pulled over because of my crime record. It's the same. It's prejudice.
It's not the same thing. You're not black. You're
I'm
white
not saying
privilege.
that. I'm talking
If you
about
would have went through all that
prejudice.
stuff, if you were black and we would have went through that same shit, you'd probably be dead right now. Your
You-
white privilege part of that
You
helped
don't
you
have
throughout
a
the-
clue. I was in Kentucky jail as a white male from the north. Do you have any fucking clue?
Dude, you have white privilege. Everything you've been through.
Dude, you don't know what you're talking about. Be a Yankee that goes to jail in the South.
Yeah, of course, that's still probably difficult.
That's
but you're
100% racial prejudice.
Dude, you're white.
I'm not saying I'm black, dude. I'm telling you I've dealt with prejudice and judgment.
You
and
said black
suppression.
circumstances, though. That's not a black
Yes,
circumstance.
the black
that
people-
has to do with just being from the north.
The
That has
black-
nothing to do with your race.
black folks
That's from
have-
your geographic location from
Black
where you come
folks
from.
have been prejudiced and judged and judged. They're judged. Black folks have been judged
They have been judged by who?
by other folks. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about prejudice and judgment. Prejudice and judgment based on a color.
Racism's rooted in oppression. First of all.
All right, well, it is what it is.
Yeah, we have circumstances that we've been through, but that has nothing to do with race. Because we are white, that whole privilege helped us throughout that process. If our mom was black and we were black, what would have happened to us would have been drastically different through our whole life. Every interaction with the cops would have been different because we were black.
My point is this.
Your circumstances weren't black circumstances.
My point is this.
Those are circumstances.
My point is this.
You can never have black circumstances because you're not fucking black.
I'm talking about the variables that culture has been through. Jail, imprisoning.
Yeah.
Okay? Suppression, lack of finance, lack of guidance, lack of direction, lack of fathers, lack of all the variables. So lack of education, lack of parenting.
Other races can go through that
let me
experience,
speak.
of course.
Lack of parenting, lack of freedom, imprisoning, prejudice, judgment, and being someone that's a former drug addict, that's a foreign felon. I can correlate, and I've been around a lot of the environments that the black people have been around.
That's true.
I have a homeboy named Rello Jackson. That I know directly. I've been around, and I grew up with Taisha and Taranay. I have more correlations to the black culture than a lot of other folks. So when I say that, I'm talking about the experience firsthand of being in jail, being a former drug addict who lacked parenting and guidance and direction, and lacked culture and lacked unity and lacked direction, and had very little education as a high school dropout, and became a felon and was in jail and being judged and predicated by the judges, the cops in every state I go to, and still to this day struggle with. I'm judged when I.
It's not because you're black though.
It's because of the circumstances.
Exactly. Black people go through that because
the
they're
same
black.
Circumstances that they go through.
But they go through it because they're black.
Yeah, and you add on the extra layer of being black. Exactly.
That's your white privilege.
But my point is, you have to.
Doesn't mean you don't go through circumstances and pain and suffering. Of course, we have gone through that.
That's my point. Is that people don't look at me and they'll never think that I've been through all that. That's prejudice. That's racist.
That's judging a book by its cover. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not racism, though. It's not racism.
That's 100% racism. If someone looks at you and says you're white, you have white privilege, you haven't been through that, that's racism. If I look at you and say you have white privilege, that is racist.
Well, you do have white privilege.
But that's racism. That's racism.
That's not racism.
If someone looked at
reverse racism doesn't even exist.
To judge me based on my skin color is racism.
But racism's rooted in oppression, bro.
What you just said is racism.
It doesn't affect us at all.
Yeah, it does. I've been suppressed. But you're judging me.
You haven't been suppressed though because of the color of your skin.
No, but
that's the fact.
I've been predicated. But that's my point.
That's your point, though.
That's racism. You're looking at it through a skin lens.
But that's what racism is. Racism is rooted in the color of your skin.
You're looking at it. That's my point. That's racist. You're looking at it through a color lens.
But that's what racism is rooted in: is oppressing people because of the color of their skin.
So now you're judging me because I'm white and acting like I haven't been through what someone else has been through.
I'm not saying you haven't been through that.
That's prejudice.
I'm saying your privilege has still helped you along that entire process, even though all of that happened.
That is prejudice.
But you can't deny the fact that if you were black, you probably wouldn't have ended up being in the same situation you are today.
You can't deny that's not prejudice to judge me based on being white.
I'm not judging you. I'm just. Can't you accept the fact that you benefited though from that?
You're classifying me and judging me. And
I'm not judging you. I'm just saying a simple statement.
100%. How are you making a deduction?
Can you not own that?
No.
Can you admit that?
No.
So you won't admit that you don't think that from your whole life experience that because you were white, that you probably benefited that if you were black, it probably wouldn't have had the same.
No, I would have had a much easier time in Kentucky jail if I was black.
Your whole life experience, though, if you look at it through everything you've been through, you don't think that your life would have turned out differently if your mom was black and you were black.
Nope. I think that'd be irrational of me to say.
You think it would have turned out the same?
I think there's tons of freedom in America. Anyone has any chance as long as they're willing to do the work and put
You don't think being black, though, puts you at a disadvantage?
No.
In a country that's systematically rooted in keeping black people oppressed.
I know tons of black people that I've met along the way living in 9 different states that have had major success.
Of course they can. I'm not saying
that
they can't.
Are incredibly educated.
But you can't deny that the system's rigged towards black people.
I disagree.
Always has been.
Okay.
Still is.
Yep. Okay. But ultimately, growth starts with auditing myself, right? So no matter who you're talking about or what environment, what culture, what minority, the first step in growth is auditing myself and my actions and how they impact where I am and what I'm doing. Because ultimately, I can't keep looking around and pointing fingers at other people. I have to take a responsibility for where I am and what I'm doing and the decisions and the actions I'm taking.
Yeah, you're right.
No matter what color my skin is, no matter what color my face is, no matter what color my eyes, I have to be accountable and responsible for the place I am and where I am.
Yeah.
Because of the actions and decisions I've made. And you said that earlier.
Yeah.
So we can't blame the government. We can't blame the people that judge us. We can't.
But you can't deny the fact either that they have systems in place to oppress people on purpose.
No, I disagree. Yeah.
So like it's a 50-50 thing. So the person has to take accountability, but their job is if you are a black person or you are someone where you feel that way, your job then is to make change. Audit your life like you're saying, and then be a leader and a solution to making change in your community and moving humanity forward.
Start to audit your culture, right? Because if I'm someone that was coming from the black perspective, I would want to start a podcast and bring voice to it, and bring perspective to it, and bring unity and cooperation.
Yeah, that's why I think we need
The
to
problem is you're talking about a culture that has spent more time killing each other than anything.
Well, first of all, a culture that the United States government actually feeds them the drugs and the guns.
Yes, but they kill
Pop
each
said
other.
it. Give them guns, give them guns, step back, watch them kill each other. The government purposely allows that because the government can come in and end that. They want it to happen. The government creates ghettos on purpose for black people to kill each other. They feed them the guns.
So much
They
propaganda.
feed them the fucking drugs. There's history shows
Conspiracies.
that the government in the 80s, watch the movie Kill the Messenger, the government fed the kilos of cocaine to black guys working with the feds to fund a government
Coming
to fight
from
the
a guy
Nicaragua.
that just talked about taking responsibility for my addiction and actions, saying I was fed a fucking drug, it sounds contradictory.
No, it's not.
So you're not taking any responsibility for taking the substance or the gun and shooting it.
Of course they are. But what I'm saying is the government isn't doing anything
So
to
it's
stop
the
it.
drug dealer's fault.
No, it's the government's contributing to it, though. Is all
It's
I'm
just
trying to say.
interesting that audit there. 'Cause it
I
sounds-
never said that government. It's their fault. What I'm
it
saying
just
is the
sounds
government.
like a